The 10 most brutal knockouts in UFC history. They may not be the most visually appealing or notable knockouts, but they are unquestionably the most vicious knockouts in MMA history.
I think right after I beat Mark Munoz, Anderson definitely didn't want to fight me.
Ones that change a person's career, and those that leave a guy on his back for several minutes before being carried out on a stretcher. Some of these fights were so gruesome that we had to turn away. For this reason, we'll be highlighting 10 of the most devastating knockout blows in UFC history. Hey fight fans, welcome back to MMA Guru TV. In this video, we are going to find out the scariest knockouts in the UFC. So without any further ado, let us begin. UFC 31, Shonie Carter versus Matt Serra. When one considers the early years of the Ultimate Fighting Championship, the knockout that occurred at the event known as UFC 31 in 2001 stands out as one of the most horrific and memorable of those early years. Shonie Carter knocked out Matt Serra with an unconventional back fist blow, which resulted in Serra being knocked out right there in front of all the MMA spectators. Carter hit the decisive strike with literally 9 seconds left on the clock in battle, with both combatants already standing and engaged in action. This allowed Carter to earn the victory. UFC 162, Chris Weidman versus Anderson Silva. Anderson Silva is considered by a large number of MMA fans to be the best fighter that the sport of MMA has ever seen. When Silva was the UFC middleweight champion, he established an absurd record for the length of a title reign. The Spider stint as champ clocked in at a staggering 2,457 days. When the Brazilian was fighting the undefeated Chris Weidman, he decided to play around with the showmanship and taunting that had been typical of his battles over the course of the years. The only problem for Silva was that Weidman didn't give a single thought about Anderson's dancing and lowering of his guard. This was the only thing that Weidman cared about. Anderson Silva had made a career out of mocking and humiliating his opponents, and it had now caught up with him and bit him in the rear end. UFC 224, Lyoto Machida versus Vitor Belfort. Lyoto Machida and Vitor Belfort are two of the most iconic names in the history of mixed martial arts, despite the fact that both competitors had long since passed the peak of their careers by 2018. The two Brazilian icons got to go at it in front of a raucous Je ne sais arena audience in Rio de Janeiro as part of UFC 224. The 41-year-old Belfort had already declared that he will retire from MMA regardless of the result here, so the fight between the two took place with that thought in mind. The fight itself was pretty slow and tedious, but the fans in Rio were merely pleased to watch Belfort, who was born and raised in Rio, compete in what would be his last fight. As Vitor Belfort remained motionless on the mat, Lyoto Machida, known as the Dragon, paid a respectful bow to Belfort. The career of an all-time great was abruptly ended in a resounding manner when he was struck in the face with a kick that was both clinical and savage. James Vick takes on Justin Gaethje at UFC Fight Night 135. Oh, James Vick. When someone starts talking a lot and then promises to knock someone else out, they're playing a game that's always risky. These remarks absolutely and completely came back to haunt James Vick and bite him in the rear end too. Prior to their fight at UFC Fight Night 135 in August of 2016, Justin Gaethje and James Vick engaged in some trash talking, but it was Gaethje who ended up having the last laugh. Not even 90 seconds into the first round of the bout, the fans retreated to Gaethje, knocking Vick out with a vicious right hand that left his opponent lying on the mat in a crumpled heap. UFC 126, Anderson Silva versus Vitor Belfort. While Chris Weidman's knockout of Anderson Silva is mentioned elsewhere on our list, it is here that we see exactly how clinical the Spider was while on offense. When they met again at UFC 126, Silva was at the top of his game and was able to overcome fellow Brazilian legend Vitor Belfort. At the very end of the bout, Silva knocked the Phenom out with a front kick that ended the bout and left his opponent in a defeated state. Anderson Silva added the name of another high-profile fighter to the growing list of opponents he has defeated, and the mixed martial arts community is once again left in a state of astonishment at how unbeatable Anderson Silva was. Vitor Belfort had no idea where he was at the time of the knockout. It wouldn't be for another 2.5 years after this battle that Anderson would be vanquished for good. UFC 102, Nate Marquardt versus Demian Maia. This is the battle you've been looking for if you've ever wanted to see an excellent illustration of a one-punch knockout in real life. At UFC 102, Nate Marquardt knocked out Demian Maia with a single punch. It was a knockout. The official time of the competition was determined to be a brisk 21 seconds, counting from the moment the fight began till the moment it came to a close. The main event of the evening was a mega fight between Randy Couture and Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira, but that 15-minute and 3-round bout was overshadowed by the single right-handed cannon that Marquardt landed in a finish that is still considered to be one of the most shocking and brutal knockouts in the history of the UFC. Edson Barboza versus Terry Edom, UFC 142. When Terry Edom thinks about the 14th of January 2012, one of the most cold-cocked knockouts in the history of the UFC, he must still feel a headache. This knockout ranks among the most devastating in the organization's history. In Brazil, where the event took place, the opponent was Edson Barboza, and it was a preliminary bout that not a lot of people were paying attention to. By the time the night came to a close, however, Barboza and Edom were the two names that everyone was talking about. Due to the fact that this fight was such a barn burner, Barboza was awarded the Knockout of the Night bonus, in addition to both fighters receiving Fight of the Night prize. UFC 56, Rich Franklin versus Nate Quarry. Many fans took an interest in Nate Quarry leading up to the UFC 56 event that took place in 2005. Quarry was the first contender from the Ultimate Fighter to gain a crack at one of the major championships held by the Ultimate Fighting Championship. Quarry competed on that first season of the Ultimate Fighter. Unfortunately for Quarry, middleweight champion Rich Franklin was ready and had him knocked out in the first round of the fight, and Franklin was able to defend his title. Not only was it a first-round knockout, but it was also one of the most violent and significant knockouts ever witnessed in the history of the UFC. That left-handed shot from Franklin still has the power to send shivers up your spine, even in this day and age. UFC 100, Dan Henderson versus Michael Bisping. Dan Henderson is recognized as one of the hardest hitters in the history of the UFC, which is a moniker that describes both him and the enormously powerful punches that he throws. It's not necessary to look any further than Hendo's bout versus Michael Bisping at UFC 100 for those who may be interested in seeing an illustration of that power. Before the event, the pre-fight feud between Henderson and the Count had been simmering, and it was evident that Henderson was eager to put an end to Bisping's persistent trash-talking. In the middle of the second round, Hendo finished off his opponent by knocking out Bisping with a rocket of a right hand. For good measure, Henderson then delivered another bomb on his already out opponent, which he would explain in his post-fight comments as that one was just to shut him up a little bit. Henderson's opponent was knocked out immediately after the second bomb was dropped. UFC 70, Gabriel Gonzaga versus Mirko Cro Cop. Mirko Cro Cop, a well-known kickboxing champion and a fan favorite in Pride, was expected to breeze through Gabriel Gonzaga at UFC 70, which was only Cro Cop's second bout in the UFC. Gonzaga stunned the mixed martial arts community when, with a powerful high kick, he knocked out Cro Cop. Although Mirko Cro Cop is still considered to be one of the best MMA fighters in history, his two stints with the UFC never quite saw the fighter ever truly hit the levels of sheer, unrelenting dominance that his fans had become accustomed to witnessing during his time in K1 and Pride. Despite this, Mirko Cro Cop still considered one of the greatest of all time. And hey, that's going to bring us to the end of today's video. Please let us know what you thought about the video. Do you think there are any major knockouts that should have been on our list that we didn't include? Hey, there's been a lot of them over the years, so make sure you let us know what your favorite one is. Or maybe we already included your favorite one on our list. Let us know which one was the best one you saw, and how many of these did you see live as they happened? I'm curious to know, fight fans. Hey, as always, if you like our video, please leave us a like and subscribe to our channel for more amazing content, and make sure you hit that bell icon so you're always notified of our latest uploads on our channel. We thank you so much for watching today, and we'll see you in the next one.